What's up, Poker YouTube? Welcome back to another How to Beat Live Low Stakes Poker video. Today's topic, talking about checking to bad players, specifically like checking to them when we're out of position. So the last video, we discussed fast playing and how even if we're out of position, if we have value combos or nutty combos, we probably should fast play them way more often than not in the live low stakes games. Our opponents tend to make a lot of mistakes over multiple streets in the form of just being too passive and or overfolding. But just in general, they're going to let us know exactly where they're at a lot of the time. And so that's good. We can determine how to play our hand accordingly, and that's what this topic today is about. But as far as the fast playing, we probably need to build the pots ourselves because our opponents aren't really going to do that for us often enough. They're just too passive and weak in general to do that in the live low to mid stakes environment. Now, as far as a little bit of, I wouldn't say like an alternate strategy, but another option that you can consider. The one benefit of playing in the live low stakes games is that your opponents are generally going to act pretty straightforward, especially if they feel that you are the superior player, if you know that they respect you, maybe even a little too much. Even if they don't, and you guys are unknown to each other, generally what will happen is your opponents will let you know where they're at in a hand pretty early and often based on a few different things, how often they do or don't bet, or if they just do or do not bet in a specific spot at all. Sizing tells are definitely a big thing, very transparent in the live low stakes environment. So when you're out of position and let's say that you feel like maybe you need a little bit of balance, or even if you don't, which you really don't often in these types of games, but let's say you aren't in the top of your range, and maybe you're like kind of, maybe you are like middle of range, or maybe you're kind of bottom and you have a hand that you feel could be a good bluffing candidate. Maybe you have a hand like, maybe you do have like a weaker top pair type of hand, whatever the case is. Let's say you check to your opponent. It's not a terrible scenario because what they do not do a good job of in position is forcing you to under-realize your equity, meaning they allow you to get to the river into showdowns too easily, too often. So it's not so bad if we check to them and they check behind and they take a free card. That's what a lot of players are worried about. That's actually a good scenario for the player out of position because they shouldn't be able to realize their equity that easily, that often. But what will happen is if you check to your opponent and it is a bad player, or just even if it is just an unknown player in the live low stakes games, those are generally 95% plus of the time, and I might be being quite generous with this, a bad player. What they'll do though is they'll let you know how they feel about their specific hand. Let's say they bet pot, then we know that they are pretty much at top of range, and so we can then act accordingly. We don't have to bluff in that spot. We can just fold our hand and move on and exploit them in that sense. If we have a draw that we know there are now an incredible amount of implied odds with that, we can check call if stacks are deep enough to dictate that being a good move, and then you can go from there on the turn. But let's say, let's go with the other scenario, as far as if we're have like a very nutty hand and our opponent bets pot, then we know that we can then, going back to the previous video, fast play, and we can check raise in that spot and try to get as much money in as quickly as possible. Especially if we're deep, if we're shallow, that's a spot where you can check call and slow play because you know it's very likely that your opponent's putting in money on the turn. Now, if your opponent instead bets like half pot or less, half pot tends to be the standard kind of like in the box bet that a lot of players will use. Somewhere around there. It could be half pot, could be 60% pot, 40%, but best be sure, best be known, whatever the case, if they bet smaller, then they generally are weaker. And so then we can take more of our range that's kind of marginal to not as good. We take some of those bluffing candidates and we can definitely now get aggressive with those. Even if we have hands that we were like, you know what, these are hands in theory against a good player that we might check call because they have some showdown value, they protect our range a little bit, all that GTO stuff. I would suggest taking more of those and turning more of those into check raises, because what ends up happening is you know that your opponent is capped and weaker more often than not when they bet small like that. They're kind of just betting for protection to see where they're at, but they're putting themselves in a really bad spot now because now they've opened up the game tree to where check raise is an option for us. And now we flip the script on them, and we now are going to force them to under-realize their equity. And that's a huge mistake for you guys that you need to take note of this. If you're somebody that's in position that gets checked to and you just bet just because your opponent checked, if you're betting with marginal kind of second, third pair hands, hands that you don't want to face a raise with essentially, you need to stop doing that, because the good players are going to attack you very often in that spot. Now, can you get away with it against the bad players? Like if we reverse this scenario and I'm checked to in position and I know my opponent is bad and they're unbalanced, and when they check to me, I know they don't have anything, so I can just stab very frequently, of course. But if there's anybody that you realize is able to play a little bit of poker, then you need to be really careful about overextending like that in position, and you need to make your range a lot more polarized. Like bet good stuff, bet bad stuff, but the middling kind of hands, you got to be careful because you don't want to face a raise with those. Your opponents will blow you off of your equity too often. So kind of flip the script at the end there. But whole point of this topic in this video, again, guys, players will act pretty straightforward when they're in position when you check to them, especially if you know they're bad. And you can get a really good feel for where you're at in the hand, and then you can make a plan from there. If your opponent checks back, you know they're capped, you know you can probably attack them relentlessly, turn and river if you need to. If they bet smaller, similar scenario, you can now take way more of your range and start to attack them because you know that their smaller sizing doesn't have enough balance. It doesn't have enough of their top end combos, their top of range. But if they bet really large, then we know that we can exploit them by overfolding, or we call with really big draws and that have really nice implied odds, or we can go for check raise if we're deep and try to win a huge pot with our top of range that we know is beating theirs. Or if we're shallower, we can just check, call, and slow play, knowing that they will put the money in way more often than not when they're betting that large on the flop. So, I was excited to bring this topic to you guys because I think this is a really good one that I was trying to look through the channel from a lot of older videos, and I was having trouble finding if I had a video like this. Maybe I do, but I mean, whatever. It's updated now in 2025, so it can really help a lot of you guys out. So yeah, if there are any questions or comments, go ahead and let me know. Of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on the link in the comment section, archcitypoker.com. Come give us a visit, and we will discuss this topic and others much more in depth, and really help you guys start to increase your win rate. So see you guys in the next video. Thanks.